Hi, everybody. Jason Barger back again with the Antheos Academy. We're back here another whiteboard session. And today we're talking about how to practice innovation and seeing our life and our work with new eyes. It's great to be back with you. We've had wonderful other classes, and it's good to be back here again and to talk about practicing innovation. Don't worry about that image. We'll get to that in a second. I know it's going to intrigue you, but we'll get to that. And I promise that it'll have something to do with what we're talking about today. This idea of innovation is interesting because every relationship, every team, every company in the world can fall into the trap of just doing the same thing we've always done, right? If you listen to the way that people talk about creativity and innovation, oftentimes the biggest challenge is, this is just the way we've always done it. Or, we get into these ruts where we feel like we can't possibly change because this is just the way that we've done it. And so we fall into these patterns, and yet we need to be able to bring a fresh set of eyes to our life, to our work, to what we're doing, to be able to step back and to look at it with new ideas. So the first thing we're talking about innovation. I think it's important for us to define what we mean by the word innovation. That's a very big word, and again, many different people have different definitions for it. So the first thing I want to let you off the hook for is, when I say innovation, I don't want you to think about that you're supposed to be the Steve Jobs kind of innovation. That don't put that kind of burden on yourself, that you have to be the one person within your team or organization that's going to come up with the one idea that's going to revolutionize your industry or the way that your whole company works. I mean, maybe you will. So I don't want to, go for it, please. You might be that person. But when I'm talking about innovation, sometimes I think we can only think about innovation in terms of those huge ideas that are going to revolutionize things the way that Steve Jobs and many others have over the years. But more simply put, I want to define innovation, which, you go to Webster's or other places that define innovation. And more simply, it is just finding a better way to do something. Finding a better way to do something. That is what innovation in its most simple form is finding a better way to do something. So when we think about our own lives, we think about how I, on an everyday basis, move throughout the world, how I relate to the people in my life, to the relationships that I have, how I go about my work, think about opportunities that may be there, think about challenges. All of those things have to be in the center of it is this idea of how can I find a better way to do it? Are there better ways that I can be more effective of bringing that mission and the person that I want to be to life? So that's the kind of innovation that we're talking about today, about practicing innovation, of finding better ways to do things that are going to strengthen your own life and your own work as well. So I want to pause for a second here, as I've done at the beginning of some of my classes, and I want to first I want you to get an image in your mind as to where you are in your life and what are you thinking about. So I want you, as we're talking about practicing innovation, for you, are you really wanting to focus on your work, maybe your team environment, maybe a project that you have? Is that what's really getting your focus and attention right now? Are you wanting to just think about your life in general, the way that you personally are moving throughout the world? Are you thinking specifically about a relationship that you need to kind of get out of the rut and maybe practice a little bit of innovation even in that relationship? Pause for a second and try to get clear on which lens are you looking at this through today. All right. So let me start out our time together by telling a story. I love to tell stories, and I think it brings these topics to life. This last college football bowl season, the end of the college football season, all the bowl games that take place, and at the halftime of every game, it seems like halftime shows and halftime contests continue to just escalate. They just keep getting bigger, right? Just everybody is out trying to outdo one another in having the biggest contest. Well, this past season I was watching one of the games, and Dr. Pepper was putting on a contest where they had two people that were down on the field, and they were going to have 60 seconds to see how many footballs they could throw through a little target, right? A little hole in this target. And after 60 seconds, whoever threw the most footballs through the hole was going to win $100,000 or a college scholarship or something. And so there it was, and these two people, these two guys were standing there, and this guy on the mic is standing in the middle of the field, and he's pumping up the crowd and trying to get everybody into this contest. And meanwhile, the one contestant to the right was this guy that was about 6'4", and he just looked like a quarterback. And even as the guy on the microphone was talking, he was grabbing the footballs out of the bucket, with the stance like a quarterback would do. And then he was going back and in perfect form, just throwing it right at the target. And he just had the look of a quarterback. And he was accurate. And he was just throwing them spiral, just looked beautiful right at the target. Well, the other guy who he was going to be going against was this short little stocky guy. And the whole time this other guy's warming up and practicing, he's standing there with just his kind of hands on his hips, and he's looking around at the entire stadium like, oh my goodness. And he's just almost in awe of all these people that now he's in front of 70,000 people or whatever it is, and a television audience. Well, finally, they get ready for the contest, and the clock's about to tick down. And if I could have paused the audience, if we could have just stopped and polled the entire stadium, and certainly me at home and everybody else watching, and said, who's going to win this contest? Every single person would have put their money on this guy on the right that was 6'4" and just looked like a quarterback. I mean, all the money would have been on this guy, and myself included. And as soon as the buzzer went off and the clock started ticking down from 60, sure enough, this guy that looked like the quarterback was just grabbing the footballs and just spiraling them right at the target, and was accurate, and he just had the look. And the clock kept ticking down, and the crowd was going crazy until finally it hit 0, and you looked up at the score, and the little stocky guy to the left had more than doubled the guy that looked like the quarterback. Had more than doubled him. And the reason why is as soon as the clock started and the quarterback grabbed the footballs, and with the form of how you traditionally throw a football, he started throwing them at the target, the other guy, the stocky guy, he wasn't even standing the way that you traditionally throw a football. He turned with his shoulders facing the target and bent over top the bucket of footballs, and as soon as the buzzer went off, he just started grabbing them and throwing them at the target, just chest pass towards the target. And all of a sudden, as it ticked down, he more than doubled the guy that looked like the quarterback. The reason why I use this to introduce this idea of seeing innovation with new eyes is that these two guys, and everybody in the stadium, I'm assuming, and myself included on TV, figured we all saw this same problem differently. And almost everybody thought that the winner of this contest would be the person that had the look and knew how to traditionally throw a football the way that we've been taught how you throw a football. But the reality is this was not a contest about how to throw a football. This was not a contest about who was the best quarterback. This was not a contest even about accuracy, although you'd think it was. This was a contest about volume, about how many footballs could you get through that hole in 60 seconds, and it doesn't matter how you do it, but how are you going to do it? And the guy that saw the same problem with different eyes more than doubled the guy who did it the way we've always done it. So when we start talking about practicing innovation in our life and in our work, I believe that it begins with that reminder that we need to step back. In my first book, Step Back from the Baggage Claim, part of what people resonated with this about the way that we move throughout the world and the impact that we have as own individual leaders and contributors in the world is to step back to see things from new perspective. and to step back and say, maybe there's a different and better and more effective or efficient way to do things. And so practicing innovation starts with stepping back and then being able to see things with new eyes, to be able to see things a little differently and ask the question of, maybe we ought to do this differently. The reason why this is important is because in your life or in your work, there are questions that are dying to be asked right now. What if we did this differently? There are habits and ruts and places that you're in right now that it's dying to ask the question of, what if we were able to step back and see this with new eyes and begin to practice this innovation of, maybe we're finding a better way to do something. So it starts with stepping back and assessing the areas of need in our own life and work. To step back and really even say, hey, for my own life or my own mode of operation, or for our team or our organization, to be able to say, what are the greatest needs? Where is it that maybe we are experiencing success, and you know what, that habit we're in is actually a great habit and we're flying along and things, let's not forget that. But then where are the areas where, maybe we are in a rut? Maybe we are going down a path that isn't bringing out our best selves. And to be able to assess that and say, maybe that's an area where we need to step back and begin to see it with new eyes. So it starts with assessing where we are in our life and our work. The next thing is that it takes focus. To practice innovation, that we have to schedule time and we have to be clear on what's going to get our focus. And that really the reality is, in a very highly busy and distracted world, in one of my other classes when I talk about my latest book, Remember, it's talking about this renewing our memberships, our relationships, and our focus in a distracting world. That we've never lived in a time in the history of the world that's more busy and distracted and cluttered than we do today. So what gets our focus and our attention has never been more important. And so the only way to be truly successful in practicing this kind of innovation is to be able to limit our targets. Instead of the 18 things I'm going to try to focus on, which I know we live in a multitasking world right now where we're all functioning in that way, but that doesn't mean we're the most effective in that way. And so to be able to assess and narrow it down, what are the 1, 2, or 3 targets that I need to focus on, because it's when I can give my eyes and my focus and attention to a couple of things, I'm gonna do them better. It's going to bring about greater distinctions, and it's going to allow me to develop and strengthen those areas. The other things that if we're talking about practicing innovation, one of the other big ideas, which may not seem like a big idea, may seem like a simple idea, but yet in a busy, distracted, and cluttered culture, we just don't take the time to do it, is that we have to create space in our own individual lives, but also as teams and organizations, to step back and ask that, what I call the what if. To enter into what if space in our own personal ethic, but then also in the ethic within our team. To have time and space where we can throw up ideas on a board, we can share them out loud, we can live in that space of, what if we did it differently? What could the possible outcome be? And that doesn't mean that you always then will jump at the next idea, or that you'll change things dramatically. I mean, you might do that. And even if you return back to where you even just began, the practice of stepping back and creating time and space to assess and challenge the idea, and to create that what if space to say, what if I did this differently? Is there a better way to do this? Out of that space comes more committed energy, ideas, and focus from not only you, but the people that you work with and the teams. There are plenty of teams and organizations that I'm lucky to serve and to help them work through this kind of idea. And part of it is, can we get you in the same frame of mind and thinking to step back and to begin to dwell in possibility, to begin to step back and assess where you are, but even allow yourself some of that what if space, and then bring it back to, okay, how are we going to begin to live into a new reality? But that takes coaching and development and time to do that what if kind of space. One of the ethics or practices of some of the most innovative and creative people that I know is that they intentionally seek new routes to do things. They intentionally seek out new ways to do things. And I'm talking about they intentionally take new routes to work. Instead of driving the same pattern to work every single day, they challenge themselves to find new ways to do it, even if it means it's going to delay them, or in some ways they're going to realize there was a better way to do it. But it's challenging their thinking to try to find a better way to do it. Some people change up the order in which they do their tasks in the morning. Some people look at their daily, ethic, their own mode of operation, and they start to say, well, instead of returning emails at the same time every day, I'm going to begin to shift that a little bit, and I'm going to try something differently. So to begin to practice our minds in doing something differently. People that challenge themselves to cook a new meal, or do something like that, to watch a show that they don't usually watch. But really what they're doing is they're seeing value in practicing innovation in the sense of trying to find a new route, a new way of doing things, so that their mind begins to adapt and understand that even when things don't play out the way that we thought they would, we're able to adjust. We're able to then see, hey, there might be other possibilities to this. And so some of the most creative and innovative people that I know are the ones that intentionally seek new routes, new ways of doing it, so they can practice that. So then when something of significance emerges, they're ready to adjust and respond openly. The image that I want to share with you, you're wondering what this horrible drawing on this dry erase board is, but is the image of bamboo. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I never knew this. But when I thought about bamboo, and I certainly thought about the way that bamboo grew, when you see a picture of bamboo, you just see the surface level, and then you just see these straight shoots of bamboo that come up right through the surface. And just in one straight shot, they shoot right up. But the reality is that's not the way that bamboo grows. Bamboo actually, underneath the surface, way down here in the soil somewhere, starts out with what is called a culm, as I've been told, is a culm. And from that seed, or that kind of epicenter, the culm, it actually starts to grow a little bit, but it shoots off in little directions. And so it may shoot off this direction. And then it grows a little bit, and then it shoots off in another direction. And then it may shoot back here. And then it grows a little bit, and it shoots over here. And then it shoots over here, and over here, and over here, and over here. And then eventually, after it grows a certain point, then it pops up through the surface, and that's the part that we see, is the part that grows up nice and straight right through the surface. The reason why I love that image is because I believe that the practice of creativity and innovation is a lot like bamboo. That a part of that what-if space, or for our own lives and thinking about the people we want to be and what we're trying to bring to life in the world, or in a creative venture with a team that's trying to actualize something in the world, oftentimes that process looks a lot like bamboo. That it starts with an idea or with a problem or something we're trying to solve, and the reality is we have to allow it space for our ideas and our work to wander like bamboo, to grow a little bit. And then another idea shoots out of that, and it grows a little bit further. And then another idea, somebody says, yeah, actually, I love that thought, but here's another thought. And then it grows a little further. And over the course of that what-if space and that time in your own life or as a team, there are a lot of ideas and a lot of things that are probably pretty good. Some of which I've been famous to say I have plenty of ideas that are not good. But it's part of that process. Some of them that aren't worthy of growing up through the surface, and some of them that just led to the next idea. But eventually along that process, there is the one idea that is worthy of giving more attention to, that needs your attention and needs you to water that seed and nurture it a little bit more so that then it can grow up through the surface. And so when we practice innovation, personally or collectively, we need to remember bamboo. We need to remember that the process, we need to allow time and space for the process to wander like bamboo. We need to stay open to a process. I mean, that's ultimately what this is talking about, is that we don't solve problems, generally speaking, overnight in one flip of the switch. In our relationships or in projects and work that we're trying to actualize, that sometimes we can make a key action that does change the game and certainly reframe that very quickly, but it often doesn't totally change everything. And one of my other classes that I'm talking about is then how do we actualize our vision? How do we bring a vision that we have to life? And so it doesn't happen overnight, but it really happens with a process of saying, what are the next questions we need to ask? What are the next actions? And then are we going to, with dedication and persistence, be willing to go and follow it? I'll tell you one last story before we end today. And in my opinion, it brings this innovation and practicing this to life. After I had written my first book, and it was getting ready to be published, it was getting ready to come out, I was getting ready for a meeting. And I was standing in my closet, and I was getting dressed for this meeting. And at the time, he's older now, but at the time, my son came in the room, and I think he was like three or at the time. He comes wandering in, and he's standing right next to me. He's about 42 inches tall at the time, and he's standing up, and he had these giant, curly hair, which, hard to imagine, I know, but curly hair. It was awesome, and these huge, big blue eyes. And he's standing there looking right up at me as I'm getting dressed for this meeting. Finally he looks at me. His name is Will. He looks up and he says, "Hey, Daddy, why don't you put your shoes on before your pants?" As I'm, getting dressed. And I looked at him and I said, "Because you don't, that's not the way you do it. You don't put your shoes on before your pants." And he said, "But why not?" And I was looking at my watch. I was late for a meeting, and I was starting to get a little like, I can't deal with this right now. And so I looked down at him, and he's looking up at me with these giant blue eyes, and he says, "But why not?" And I said, "Well, because if you put your shoes on first, then when you went to put your pants on, your pants wouldn't fit over top of the shoe. That's the way it is. Hey, you little punk, this is the way you do it. This is how you get dressed. I'm teaching you." And he looks up at me, and with the big blue eyes, and he says, "Just try. Just try." And so I'd just written this book about stepping back to be present and thinking about the kind of people we want to be in the world. And certainly what my son was needing at the time was my focus, was my attention. And so I got down on my knees, so I could stare him right in the face, and he's saying, "Just try." I looked at him and I said, "All right, son, I will. Just a second." And so I started to, take my pants back off, and then my shoes are sitting there, and then I, go to put my shoes on, and I tie my shoes on first, and then I go to grab my pants, and then right before I start to step into them, I kind of look down at the little guy, give him a glance as if, hey, this is a teachable moment right here, like I'm about to teach you a little lesson, you little punk, And I look at him like that, and I start to step into my pants, and sure enough, the pants go right over top of my shoes and go in. And I look down at him, and again with those giant blue eyes, he looks up to me and he says, "See? It worked." There couldn't have been a more fitting image for where I was in my own journey. The fact that I had just recently quit my job a year earlier, had gone and slept in airports, and was writing this book, Step Back from the Baggage Claim, where we had no idea what it was going to become or I was even doing, yet I was going off on this creative journey to bring a message and a spirit and a thought to life in the world and actualize something. And when the rest of the world or the people around me were saying, "Hey, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why would you do that?" Here was my son reminding me to just try, and reminding me that part of practicing innovation or creativity is being willing to step back and assess and say, maybe I know this is the way we always do it. This is the way you always get dressed. But maybe every once in a while you got to just try to put your shoes on first. To put your shoes on first. So as you start to think about practicing innovation in your own life and your own work and with the people around you, I hope you remember to every once in a while just try. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way all the time. Doesn't mean that it'll be the way that it has to be. But just that practice of trying to put your shoes on first will lead to important distinctions and take you places and help you learn things that will add value down the road. The last thing I'll end with, which is the way I've been ending all my classes and many of the groups that I speak to or consult with around the world, is this idea of having a bias toward action. I love that phrase. I think every time we end a session that we ought to have a bias towards action. And again, I'll create the distinction. I don't want it to be a bias towards busyness, towards just going, running off in scattered different directions, trying to do 118 things. It's really about getting clear on what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that are going to be my bias toward action. After spending these few minutes to pause and step back and think about practicing innovation in my life and my work, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that you're going to try to do, that you're going to initiate? Are you going to carve out that what if space? Are you going to try some new routes? Are you going to engage in some conversations that will challenge you and your team or your organization to maybe put your shoes on first for a little while? Are you going to step back and say, how do we need to see our life, my life, and our work with new eyes? And in that process, I guarantee you there will be things that will come to the surface, like bamboo, where then you say, here's what needs to be actualized. And it starts with that 1, 2, or 3 first steps and your bias toward action. Thank you so much for being a part of this Entheos class. I hope you'll jump into the other classes that I'm teaching at Entheos and certainly all the other ones that are so great. I hope you'll stay connected to the work that I'm doing, and if I can ever add value to you or be a resource, then I would love that. You can learn more at stepbackleadership.com. You can learn more about my books and the work that's been happening at stepbackfromthebaggageclaim.com or bookremember.com. Thank you. Have a great day, and good luck putting your shoes on first and practicing innovation in your life and work. Have a great day.